I need to read this UWI TV disclaimer. It says all events taking place in this venue may be photographed, video recorded, or rebroadcast or live streamed for marketing, social media, and media purposes. By attending this event, you grant the University of the West Indies TV permission to use and publish any recorded material. So I have done that. So let me go back to business. And just once again to say a very good afternoon to you all. So you know that my name is not Carmel Roofboy. And unfortunately, Carmel is ill and is unable to be here with us this afternoon. And so I am deputizing for her. And if you know the connection, then you would know that Carmel is very, very ill and can't make it. But enough said. So by way of opening remarks, Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Education, Professor Sylvia Coinberg, Professor Stafford Griffith, I think he will be online, specially invited guests from the UK and the wider Caribbean, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, Professor Jennings Craig, who is here with us this afternoon. This book provides first-hand accounts from practitioners experiencing change in curriculum in school systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean. It problematizes the challenges experienced and offers solutions for navigating changes in school systems. So this afternoon, we're here to celebrate with Professor Jennings the book Revisioning Change, Case Studies of Curriculum in School Systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean. One of the persons who have done a review on this book is Dr. Frank Reeves, who is from the UK. He may be online, and he's the former vice principal of Bilston Community College and executive officer of Race Equality West Midlands. He was a graduate school with Professor Jennings at Birmingham University in the UK in the late 70s, and they have maintained contact over the years. He has done a review of this book, and that review will be published in one of the SOE journals. Dr. Reeves noted, Revisioning Change provides an indispensable insight and guide for educational policymakers, planners, principals, and teachers for the difficult and complex business of changing and improving students' educational experiences at preschool, primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. The author of this seminal book makes use of numerous case studies of curriculum innovation. First, to describe them critically, to examine the process of changing the rationale, content, and the means of delivery of what is imparted in learning environments across the curriculum. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pretty sure that this afternoon we're really going to be in a space that looks at a very important document that looks at curriculum change in the Caribbean. And I am very pleased to be here this afternoon, standing in for my colleague and friend, Carmel Roof. So at this time, I'm going to ask Professor Lorraine Cook to come now and say a prayer for us.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay, I'll take it. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. First, I want to say congratulations to Professor Jennings Craig. Professor Jennings Craig, you are an inspiration. And let us pray. Lord, thank you for your grace and mercy in the life of each person present here. Thanks for allowing us to gather here today for this book launch. We ask for wisdom and guidance for the proceedings today. We pray that the influence of this book by Professor Jennings will extend beyond the university and Jamaica. Bless Professor Jennings. Bless each person here with your presence. Bless our conversation, God, with goodwill and sincerity. And we ask again that your presence will guide every proceedings here in the blessed name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thanks, Lorraine, for that prayer and for starting this off on such a good note. So I'm pretty sure you have your programs and we're going to follow accordingly. So we're going to have some greetings in the order here. The Director School of Education, that would be me. Then we'd have Professor Coinberg, that's the Dean. And we also have Miss Christine Randall, who is the Director of the UWI Press. So having observed all protocols, I just really want to say what a joy it is for me this afternoon to be here. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart, as we would say in Jamaica. I want to express on behalf of the School of Education and to really express how thrilled I am that UWI Press and the school can collaborate on this venture. And there are two main reasons why, as a School of Education, this means a lot for us. Firstly, Professor Jennings served the school in several capacities. And it is an opportunity for us to give back and to showcase the outstanding work that she has done and the outstanding colleague she has been in the School of Education and the UWI. She served the school as head of the Department of Educational Studies for several years. In fact, I was a member of the staff of the DES for the entire period of her headship. So when I joined the school, she became head of the DES shortly. And then when she left, she was head of the School of Education, and I was still a member of staff there. And so I have come to appreciate, as the director for the School of Education, how demanding this job is. It's so involved, so many activities trying to balance relationships with various stakeholders. It's time consuming, and one does not always get a chance to complete personal and professional goals that one sets for oneself. I remember one afternoon coming out of this then Smith Center, and Prof was going to a class that she was going to NELT, and I just stopped and we were chatting. And she said to me, I don't think you remember this, Prof, but she said to me, one of the things that she has sort of not been able to do as head is to continue with her research the way she really wanted to. And that stuck with me. And so that of the need for part-time students and not full-time students. And that brought in quite a lot of students to the School of Education at the time. And you were there at the helm when we became a school again, when we became the School of Education, merging the two departments. So you have been there for a lot of that change. And I think the strength of your leadership is in your understanding of curriculum and curriculum change. You have a genuine love for the School of Education and you believe in the value of its work and the need to cherish the legacy of the School of Education. And I don't think that, and I could go on and on. But the second reason why this launch is very important for us as a school is that it is aligned with the work of the School of Education. The theme of the school for the next 3 years is Transforming Teacher Education, ARISE. And ARISE stands for Advocating Relevance, Inclusivity, Sustainability, and Equity. Advocating relevance speaks to local, regional, and global agendas, and sustainability speaks to the quality of services as it relates to teachers, educator excellence, etc. And there are 4 P's that we are addressing during this time: people, programs, public service and partnerships, and publication and practice. Sustainability, therefore, is a very strong theme when I consider what it is that we're doing here this afternoon with respect to people, capacity building for academic staff. Now, I don't know if you know all the dynamics, but for those of you who know the individuals here, when you look at this program, what you will see here is you have Professor Jennings, and the person who should be here now is Carmel, and sitting at the back there is Hope. And both Carmel and Hope, Professor Hope Main and Dr. Roof, are Professor Jennings's students. She was their supervisor. And the guest speaker is Professor Stafford Griffith, who was also a past head of the school, and sitting in the audience, the person who will in fact introduce him is Dr. Claudia Williams-McBean. And so when you think of it, I mean, I think it couldn't have been more carefully planned to have this sort of, you know, this stark expression of succession and the way in which the School of Education has supported this kind of scholarship. And so I think it's really fitting that we're gathering this way. And I know that, Prof, you had a lot to do with the names on this list. I know it's just a part of how you think, but I'm sure that this session is going to be very valuable for all of us. And there's no doubt of the relevance of this book. In chapter 10 and pages 205 to 215, it states, change is a process, not an event. It requires a series of continuous actions. According to Jennings, doing change differently involves freeing our minds from the dependency on external funding for education, making better use of resources and reduce costs, avoid overreach, give change agents specialized training, pay more attention to changing beliefs and attitudes, put more emphasis on the adaptation of innovations, focus innovations more directly on learners and learning, and reimagine how we measure change. That's just a snippet. I'm going to stop now because I could go on, but I won't. I'm going to give room now, however, to Professor Sylvia Coinberg, who is our dean, for her to bring greetings.
Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, and of course, the person around whom this event revolves, Professor Celine. It's really, bringing greetings is a very narrow remit. Marcia, I remember your leadership from a slightly, a bit more distance, being in a different department, but I have the same recollection of, the calm demeanor, the firmness, the focus, and how much you were able to accomplish over the years that you in that position. So of course, education ultimately was the Faculty of Humanities and the good thing, I don't know, at least it's given me this opportunity to start and really to see how much you to bring in of our recent experience in the making, and that you had more or less conceptualized it completely before the pandemic came. So you must have done quite a bit of reworking it. So since you start with the pandemic, I want to start there too, because somewhere in the middle of the pandemic, I remember being in Portland Cottage, which is a very sort of, you know, from the perspective of Kingston, remote community, very rural, very disenfranchised, very technologically underserved. And there was this 9-year-old boy with a tablet. And I was like, oh, great, you know, you're getting your classes online. And his auntie, who he lived with, explained that no, he was not getting any classes online since they didn't have any internet service. That once a week he would pick up his homework from school, and then he would have to do that best he could at home, and then hand it back in, and then hope that he might get some useful feedback. And, you know, that's a very clear illustration of how the move to online teaching did not serve very large sections of our school populations. And so the book here provides us with a number of lessons from the past, but it also adds new ones from these recent experiences. One of the things I found interesting is that you divide the project goals for different projects that you evaluate into philosophical/pedagogic, cultural, focused on social equity / emotional, and economic. And I think the emotional component is a goal in very few projects, but going forward must be a goal in every project, because if this pandemic has shown us one thing, is that there is an emotional aspect to education, to educational situations, and to our interventions as well. I want to repeat what I said at a recent book launch in the same room, that this is also a very good illustration of how important it is that we keep our retirees very close to us, because their work must continue to inform what we do. And you, in this book, present a bird's eye view of quite a range of projects. That bird's eye view is clearly based on decades of experience, and that experience must not be lost to us because of the unfortunate event of your retirement. In your final chapter, you ask, will we do things differently in the future when we introduce change into our school systems? This is a question that only future research can answer, and I hope that that will be your research. On behalf of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, welcome to this event.
Thank you, Dean. And now invite Ms. Catherine Randall, the director of the UWI Press, to come and bring greetings.
Thank you, Dr. Rainford. I was a bit worried when I saw Professor Cook have to tip. I thought I might suffer the same fate, but happily no. Dean, Dr. Rainford, and of course, Professor Jennings, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, all, I greet you well on behalf of the UA Press. It is a pleasure on my first official outing on behalf of the press to share in this occasion with Professor Jennings, with whom I have had a relationship in a previous dispensation. It's wonderful to be able to carry that on in this space and in this location. I must warn you, I'm still navigating the university landscape, but I will say that brevity is the hallmark of most of my addresses. At the press, our mission is to be the premier scholarly book publisher in the Caribbean, to enhance and encourage research and publication of Caribbean scholarship, to promote the global reputation of the university we serve, and also to create new knowledge and opportunities, which then serve as a catalyst for the realization of a better Caribbean society. In pursuit of that last goal, the practical application of research to serve as a catalyst for a better society, Professor Zelin Jennings has been unwavering. Her commitment not only to excellent research, but also to research which can be taken up and positively used. Revisioning Change, the publication we celebrate here today, is her latest contribution on curriculum change, identifying and posing as it does, drivers for change in the development and implementation of curriculum innovations in response to the challenges faced by Caribbean countries. The key to this book, successfully being that catalyst for change, rests on engaging in meaningful communication of the research it covers to both stakeholders and the general public. To that end, I'm happy to report that this book, released in August 2022, has already reached the desk of the Minister of Education here in Jamaica and is making its way to policymakers across the Caribbean through the marketing efforts of the press. Go UE Press. Indeed, the challenges of the past 2 years notwithstanding, the press has remained active in its undertakings and is proud to be celebrating its 30th year of furthering the goals of the University of the West Indies. On that note, I invite you all to visit the press Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, to see the breadth of our offerings for yourselves. We are located here on the campus, on the road leading down to the Mona Bowl. Set back from the road, you'll find us just before you reach Georgia Lean Hall. Or of course, you can visit the website, uapress.com, lots of information there. And there's always something on offer. I'm sure we're going to have a International Women's History Month special going on soon. We have a busy year ahead. I believe this is our second engagement of 3 for this week alone. And there are several stimulating publications in the pipeline. We're still playing COVID catch-up, but we remain steadfast to our mission to engage and empower the scholarly community we serve. Professor Jennings, I thank you again for choosing the UE Press as the vehicle for communicating your research and that change that is possible, and to allow us to participate in being that catalyst for change in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Randall. Professor Jennings spent a number of years in Guyana, and one of our recent directors of school, Professor Griffith, is Guyanese. He is back in Guyana, and she is back here. And I'm going to ask Dr. Clavia Williams-McBean to come now and introduce Professor Stafford Griffith, who is our keynote speaker for this afternoon.
Good evening. You can hear me, right? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce the main speaker for this evening's auspicious event, a man who has envisioned, developed, implemented, and revisioned change. A man with a wealth of experience advising on, developing, teaching, assessing, researching, and writing about varied curricula implemented in the Caribbean, Professor Emeritus Stafford A. Griffith. Professor Griffith has experienced Caribbean and international curricula as a learner. He holds a PhD from the University of the West Indies, a Master of Education, and a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Guyana, a Bachelor of Laws from the University of London, and he completed graduate studies in development studies at the American University Institute of International Research in Washington, and political science in the Masters of Political Science program at the University of Guyana. So he's been there. The learner transitioned into an educator, as he currently serves as a professor in the Faculty of Education and Humanities at the University of Guyana. Before that, he dedicated 15 years of service to the University of the West Indies after being appointed to the UWI Professorial Chair at the Mona Campus School of Education in 2005. During his tenure as UWI professor, Professor Griffith developed the Master of Education in Educational Measurement offered in the School of Education. Graduates of this program currently serve as measurement specialists in a number of institutions, including the Caribbean Examinations Council, teacher training colleges across the Caribbean, community colleges across the region, and universities, including the UWI and the University of Guyana. He also developed and taught a number of specialized courses in the Ed Measurement program. I stand here as one of the proud graduates of the Educational Measurement program, and coincidentally, I am now the program coordinator for the face-to-face and online Ed Measurement program. I also teach many of those courses that he developed. In many ways, I am just a small example of Professor Griffith's profound contribution to education and educational development in the Caribbean. His vision and nurturing set me on an exhilarating journey, which led to my merging language education, English, with educational measurement, mathematics, what many consider an unlikely pair. I am not the only one who benefited from Professor Griffith's supervision. He has supervised to completion over 50 Masters of Education research projects, 4 PhD theses, including mine, and 1 MPhil thesis. He has also served as an internal examiner for several PhD theses. This consummate educator is also a transformative leader. At various points of his professorial tenure at the UWI, Professor Griffith served as director of the USAID-funded Caribbean Center of Excellence for Teacher Training, director of the School of Education and deputy dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, director of the university's Regional Office of Online Learning. He also served as interim principal and pro-vice chancellor of the UWI Five Islands campus located in Antigua and Barbuda, which was established to serve the needs of Eastern Caribbean countries in August 2019. During his tenure, Professor Griffith envisioned and implemented changes from which the School of Education and the UWI continue to benefit. For example, in response to the sometimes insurmountable challenges students face in fulfilling the requirements of the Masters of Education program by completing the daunting research project, Professor Griffith led the revision and implementation of an Option A program, where students receive greater support in completing research and produce a research article instead of a project. Students from this program have presented their work at local and international conferences. They have also published their journal articles, including a special issue related to curriculum and evaluation, and book chapters in the recently published Each One, Teach One, Parental Involvement and Family Engagement in Jamaica's Education System. The students, including myself, are arguably following in Professor Griffith's footsteps because he has published over 100 items, including journal articles, journal articles, scientific scholarly papers, technical reports, books and book chapter, monographs and study guides, and other course materials. The publication covered areas related to various aspects of education, including university education, innovations in education, educational reform, educational measurement and evaluation, curriculum evaluation, and development. Professor Griffith received a number of awards because of his contribution to the university. In 2010, he received the Principal's Research Award for Team Leader of a research project attracting the most funds from the Faculty of Humanities and Education. In that same year, he received the Principal's Award as Team Leader for a research project with the greatest business economic development impact from the faculty. In 2015, he received the Principals Award for the research project with the greatest multidisciplinary cross-faculty collaboration from the faculty. And in 2016, he received the Principals Award for the best research publication in the book category. Quite accomplished, right? Yes. Basically, for the book that he published on school-based assessment in a Caribbean public examination, which was also published by the University Press, Go UE Press. And it is also the only book written on the subject area in the Caribbean, so you're doing good stuff. Professor Griffith's experience and contribution extend beyond the UWI. Before coming to UE, he served the Caribbean Examinations Council, CXC, in the positions of Assistant Registrar and Head of Unit. Subsequently, he served the USAID Regional Development Office of the Caribbean as a Foreign Service National in the positions of Education Project Manager and Senior Education Project Manager. He also served as Director of the UE Canada Institutional Strengthening Project and went on to serve as Consultant and National Coordinator of the World Bank, Government of Jamaica, Reform of Secondary Education Roads Project before returning to CXC as the Council's Registrar. For several years, Professor Griffith has served as the Chairman and Chief Technical Advisor for the CXC's Technical Advisory Committee, which provides quality assurance advice for the grading of performance in CXC's examinations, including CAPE and CSEC. As a consultant, he has also prepared a number of technical reports to guide the work of the CXC. For his exceptional contribution to and impact on the work of the Overseas Examinations Council, he was honored in 2018 with the Legacy Builder Award. Over the years, Professor Griffiths has provided service as a resource person in a number of regional and national curriculum development, teacher training, and measurement and evaluation activities. He also served as a consultant to a number of regional and international institutions and organizations, including the Ministry of Guyana, the University of Guyana, and many other organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, I end where I started. This evening, as Professor Jennings Craig launches her latest book entitled Revisioning Change, Case Studies of Curriculum in School Systems of the Commonwealth Caribbean, we are going to be treated with the main address from a man who has envisioned, developed, implemented, and revisioned educational change in the Caribbean. A man who has a wealth of experience advising on, developing, teaching, assessing, researching, and writing about varied curricula implemented in the Caribbean. Please help me welcome this evening's main speaker, Professor Emeritus Stafford A. Griffith.
Chair, distinguished persons in the audience, ladies and gentlemen, I am both honored and delighted to have been accorded the privilege of making a few comments in this afternoon's formal launch of the latest book by Professor Emerita Zeline Jennings. The book is titled Revisioning Change, Case Studies of Curriculum in School Systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean, and is published by the prestigious University of the West Indies Press. It is a book that should be a part of the collection of every educational planner, educational administrator, lecturer, and undergraduate and graduate student interested in the issue of shaping change in an education system. Samuel Johnson, the celebrated 18th century English critic, biographer, essayist, poet, and lexicographer, once said, "The greatest part of a writer's time is spent in reading in order to write. A man will turn over half a library to make one book." When you consider the exhausting list of books, articles, and various documents cited by Jennings, even managing to locate and cite some of my own obscure writings, which must have been buried under piles of work done by more established colleagues, you will easily agree that Professor Emerita Zelene Jennings, must have turned over more than half a library in her effort to provide us with this well-researched scholarly work that is being formally launched today. Anyone who has had the privilege of working closely with Professor Jennings, as I have, knows that it is hard to find a scholar more meticulous in the interrogation of an issue. The substance and depth of our discourse, which draws on the richness of our experience and accomplishments throughout our life's journey, cannot go unnoticed. It is this careful exploration and interrogation of issues that characterize this book being launched today. Reading this book was a delightful and enlightening experience for me. I have no doubt that it will be the same for others. Jennings takes us through 10 chapters of revealing and erudite analysis of case studies of curriculum change, but not before giving us a commanding introduction, which you must not miss in reading this well-written book. The introduction reminds us that the book was published in the troubling years of COVID-19. That fact was skillfully used by the writer to contextualize the challenge of change with which Commonwealth Caribbean education systems have to cope. By calling attention to the impact of COVID-19 and the rapid unplanned changes that had to take place to deliver at-home schooling, Jennings calls attention to the value of case studies for understanding the challenge of change in Commonwealth Caribbean education systems. For those who may not be familiar with the Commonwealth Caribbean, which is an important context for grasping fully the value of this publication, Jennings provides in her first chapter a good primer on this region, the countries that comprise it, their economies, education systems, and the cultural issues that shape the change in the education systems of these countries. Here, she discusses a number of projects whose philosophical and pedagogical goals contributed significantly to shaping the orientation of the education system in the Commonwealth Caribbean. In the next chapter, Jennings addresses the issue of how we introduce change in education systems. She analyzes change process by using two models, the research, development, and diffusion model, and the problem-solving model, which she explains in details before illustrating the application of these models to specific innovative projects in the Commonwealth Caribbean. For those who may be wondering what the difference is between the two models, Jennings explains quite cogently that the research, development, and the diffusion model is a change process that involves, and I quote, a rational sequence of activities in which the innovation is initiated, then developed, produced, and disseminated to its users, who are assumed to be passive consumers willing to accept the innovation. Jennings explains that this model is associated with the 1960s and 1970s, when the products of curriculum development were made to be teacher-proof, in that teachers were expected to use them without adaptation. She later explains, of course, that this approach, where the user is perceived as a passive receiver or consumer, leads to certain challenges, not the least of which is that the curriculum, having been conceived without the involvement of teachers, was likely to be interpreted differently from what was intended. My students in the graduate course I currently teach on issues and perspectives in Caribbean education would find this discussion most illuminating as they consider the issues of teacher-proof curriculum and its challenges. I am sure that other graduate students and educational researchers and policymakers will also find Jennings' discourse on this issue equally enlightening. Jennings naturally favors the problem-solving model of curriculum innovation and change, where, as she puts it, the user is an active participant, which leads to the likelihood that the solution selected would have direct relevance and appropriateness for the specific context in which it is to be implemented, and therefore more likely to succeed. As a person involved in project implementation in much of my professional career, I was quite excited about the third chapter of the book, which deals with the implementation of curriculum change and the measurement of success. In this chapter, Jennings discusses a compendium of factors that impact successful project implementation, which should serve as a checklist for all educators involved in educational innovation. She illustrates the importance of each of these elements by analyzing the extent to which it was present in the 4 projects she had identified that fit one or the other of the 2 implementation models she discussed earlier. She calls attention both to the presence of elements that supported their success and sustainability, and the absence of elements which had the obverse effect. In the next chapter, Jennings discusses 3 innovations designed to address literacy problems of different groups of children in the Commonwealth Caribbean. Here she lauds the multi-country Caribbean Center for Excellence in Teacher Training project, implemented by the University of the West Indies as an example of a project with many areas of success when compared to the other 2 reading projects she analyzed. She calls attention to the following factors that distinguish the Caribbean Center of Excellence in Teacher Training from the other 2 projects she considered in this chapter. I will cite just 2 that include the use of the Caribbean Reading Standards Achievement Test, CRSAT, to assess the students' reading levels, and the skillful harnessing and use of technology which facilitated the ongoing monitoring and evaluation of the project. At a personal level, I was rather effusive about Jennings's assessment of this project, since I was privileged to serve as its regional director. This is a project that was initiated under the stewardship of Professor the Honorable Errol Miller, a colleague I share in common with our illustrious writer whose work is formally launched today. I can confirm the primacy of value of the Caribbean Reading Standards Achievement Test, CRSAT, not only for the formative and summative assessment of students in the project, but also for providing useful information for project review, planning, and management. This chapter deserves careful reading, particularly for consolidating an understanding of some of the critical factors that contributed to the successful innovation of a curriculum change project and the lessons we can learn from the Caribbean Center for Excellence in Teacher Training. The next 2 chapters deal with elements of technology, the use of which Jennings earlier cited as a contributor to the success of the Caribbean Center for Excellence in Teacher Training. In the first of the 2 chapters, Jennings explores the issue of whether technology can revolutionize teaching and learning, while in the other chapter, she discusses 2 case studies, one from Jamaica and the other from Guyana, 2 countries in which she lived and provided a wide range of educational services. She contrasted the experience of using traditional technology to train teachers in the more remote parts of Guyana with that of training teachers in Jamaica through more sophisticated and modern technology. I believe that the author would agree that some of her broad contextual socioeconomic assessment of Guyana now the world's fastest growing economy, with its newfound oil wealth, would need to be revisited. But that is a matter for the next edition of the book. The issue of teachers as agents of change is the focus of chapter 7. Jennings concludes that producing teachers who are agents of transformation, who have shared their didactic pedagogy for more student-centered constructivist teaching, has proven to be a remarkably difficult task in our Commonwealth Caribbean countries. She recommends that to achieve the professionalism that makes the teachers agents of transformation, we must begin by revising or revisiting our approach to introducing change into school system. The image of teachers associated with these approaches and the approaches that we use to train teachers to implement the change. Jennings concludes the case studies of change with a chapter 8 that calls attention to what happens when fidelity implementation fails. The focus is on an innovative project, the Basic School to Primary School project, which was designed to improve preparation of 3 to 5-year-olds of impoverished backgrounds in a rural area in Jamaica to transition from basic school to primary school. Teachers in 8 transition schools were expected to implement an innovative integrated approach to teaching supported by varied assessment techniques. The outcome of the project was measured by a comparison of the performance of the children who attended the transition basic schools with those in a controlled basic school. Incredibly, perhaps, the students who attended the controlled basic school outperformed those who attended the transition basic schools where the project was implemented. No doubt, teachers and students of research methods would want to explore more fully the assessment methodology which was part of this project, which in fact used 8 transition schools and 1 control school. Jennings's inclusion of this case in the book was, however, to call attention to the failure of fidelity implementation in this project, and correctly so, due to the failure to implement properly various elements of the innovation. These include failure to provide adequate workshop-based training for teachers, failure to provide children with access to resource materials, which in fact remain stacked away on opened packages, failure to improve the physical conditions in project schools to facilitate the required method of teaching, and the failure to provide in a timely way the new furniture that were expected to support the new method of teaching. But Jennings does not leave the reader to ponder alone the value of these case studies. The first words of the next chapter, chapter 9, are, "Our journey has ended." But greatly would the reader err were he or she to interpret the statement as a start of an anticlimactic chapter. In my view, this chapter 9 on lessons learned is one of the more important chapters in the book, if not the most important chapter. For those who would have read the book carefully up to this point, an exploration of the past projects and the tremendous learning journey through which they were taken by the author would have left them with much on which to reflect. Jennings, therefore, appropriately asked the question, based on the lessons from the past, can we formulate a theory that would guide policymakers and educational planners in the future? Jennings herself does not actually seek to posit a theory, but seeks to distill for the reader the drivers of change in the Commonwealth Caribbean education system based on an examination of the experience in these countries in introducing innovation in the school system. She emphasized the point that change is a process, not an event. Based on the case studies considered in the earlier chapters, Jennings summarizes 10 critical drivers of change in the education systems of Commonwealth Caribbean countries, which are worthy of careful attention. Jennings does not explicitly say so, but I believe that in this chapter, she has discussed what clearly is a theory of educational innovation and change. According to Jennings, there is no blueprint for curriculum change, but having read the book, I believe that Jennings has given us such a blueprint. Jennings ends our book with a final chapter in which, among other things, she issues 8 challenges for policymakers and educational planners in introducing change in the school system. Professor Emerita Zelene Jennings has been a trailblazer in education and has made seminal contribution to the literature on Commonwealth Caribbean education. The book being launched today will, no doubt, be another invaluable addition to that seminal contribution. This is a book that deserves a place of privilege in your collection, and I urge you to obtain a copy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Griffith. You know, technologies are such that there's a time when we wouldn't have this possibility, but COVID, and then we have come to understand how easy this is. And so the distance doesn't exist in this context. Thank you, Prof. Griffith, for that very positive commentary. And I'm really happy that we were able to have him here this afternoon. Now we're going to pause a bit and change a bit and have a different sort of experience. And we have Mr. Ewan Miller, saxophonist, who is going to come now to play for us. Mr. Miller is a student of course, the MEd Curriculum Studies, Curriculum and Instruction Program. And I'd invite him now to come and entertain us. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. That was really soothing for the spirit. Excellent. All right, so we're now at the point where we're going to have reflections on the book. And there are two persons who are going to give their reflections. The first person, that's one where Hope, that's one where's Hope, is Dr. Hope Main, Associate Professor, Graduate Studies Coordinator for the University of Technology, Jamaica. And I had mentioned before, a past student of Professor Jennings. And she'll be followed by Mrs. Sharika McGowan Hunter, a current MPhil PhD student in the School of Education, being supervised by Dr. Roof, who isn't here just now. Professor Hope.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that lovely rendition. I'm feeling like I should be passing out roses to Professor Jennings right there while sitting there. So I'm very happy to provide the reflection on this book. I really feel honored that I've been asked. I'm your student, but I'm saying to myself, why Hope? But yes, I appreciate it. So the book, Re-envisioning Change, Case Studies of Curriculum in School Systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean. The book presents an interesting account of case studies, which builds on the curriculum implementation, innovation, and change past and present. It takes us on a journey which forces us to reflect on the practice and praxis of curriculum innovation, implementation, and institutionalization in Caribbean schools. Now, it paints a picture of what curriculum implementation should look like in the Caribbean context. The cases focuses on how we do change, how we introduce change in our school systems. What does successful implementation look like? Essentially capturing the measure of successful implementations. The cases provide a fulsome description on implementing innovations in Caribbean primary schools, secondary schools. And also it focuses on just using, how do we use technology in training to teach, case studies from Jamaica and Guyana. Now, reflecting on the purpose of these chapters, it really signals the need for educators to read this book to help to inform our ways of thinking about curriculum innovation, curriculum implementation, and curriculum change. It captures what we need to know about curriculum implementation and just how we should go about doing it. The book, I feel, is applicable to curriculum scholars, graduate students, teachers, school leaders within the Caribbean and international sphere. It captures a thorough understanding of curriculum implementation in the field, and it really draws on the works of other authors in the field, or what you call it, stalwarts, such as Fullan and Pomfret, Rogers and Shoemaker, Cuban, Marsh and Collin, and Huberman and Miles. I hope I got that right, because we learned all of those persons in our curriculum class. Now, I like how the cases, how they drew on those great scholars in the field, they would help to drive curriculum change. And as quoted in the book, change is a complex phenomenon. And so the book provides an insight on how to adopt and how to adapt to change. The book really provides insight on what it means to be a change agent as a teacher. And that chapter really resonated with me because I'm also in teacher preparation as well. So the chapter really gives a good exploration on how well teachers should be prepared to become change agents. What images of teachers do innovations in the Caribbean countries reflect Are demands compatible with the teacher's accustomed behavior and classroom practices? How do we train teachers to implement innovations? And that's a critical point made in the book that I think that we as persons or educators in the Caribbean would gravitate to. So the chapter really focuses on, why innovations fail and what lessons we can learn from these failures. And of course, an analysis was shown, as to why some innovation fails because they're from a top down. So we really must be able to include the teachers in that conversation. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I am totally honored to be given this privilege this afternoon to speak on this matter or having read this book. Now I'm going to ask you just to pause for a little and think with me, bear with me a little, and picture this scene. Picture for me, there's a new innovation, there's a curriculum or something to be implemented. Teachers, they have at least a master's degree. The teachers who are going to be implementing this, they have at least a master's degree in the area that they are currently teaching. They are equipped with the tools for implementation. They have manageable class sizes, around 25 to 30. The students each have their own tools to enable implementation. They have ongoing year-long trainings in the new innovation or the curriculum that they will be implementing. The principals are trained and they are knowledgeable in the new curriculum or innovation that they are going to be implementing. And they are willing and able and ready to provide support for the teachers. Now, if you're done thinking about it, snap out of it. That's maybe the reality in Finland or in another developed country. But that's not our reality in the Commonwealth Caribbean. And chapter 7, which is the focus of my discourse this afternoon, really zoomed in on that. And just as Dr. Main said, this chapter stood out for me. It is entitled Teachers as Agents of Change, the Ideal and the Real. The chapter compels us to face the realities of the teachers who are tasked with a mammoth task of implementing curriculum change and innovations. In this chapter, Professor Jennings, challenges us to see things from the perspectives of the teachers. Now she gives us a view from the teachers, and we can imagine teachers are the ones, quote unquote, in the trenches. And like the soldiers in World War I who were in the trenches, the teachers' perspectives are critical. What Professor Jennings did was to give us that view from the teachers. And in so doing, she sort of shattered our perceptions of what teacher agency looks like in the Commonwealth Caribbean. She looked at countries such as Belize, Jamaica, Guyana, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Barbados. And she started from as far back as 1975 with the commencement of the CSEC exam to present. What I found interesting was her definition that she gave of teacher agency. She quoted Priestley et al. From 2012, and she gave us the definition of teacher agency, teachers acting autonomously. But she also gave us the idea that teachers can act autonomously when they are given the tools within which to do so, the environment within which to do so. Professor Jennings, she challenges us to reflect on our own reality within the Commonwealth Caribbean. And she quotes, in Caribbean, in common curriculum countries, however, teachers do not enjoy the privilege of choice. They are mandated to implement innovations. She continues to say, it is one thing for policy to frame teachers as agents of transformation, and quite another to put in place the systems necessary for this to happen. The dominant view of the teacher is that of curriculum implementer, not a musical composer, but one who plays music composed by others. I thought that was quite riveting, her way of putting that curriculum teachers are curriculum implementers. They are playing a music that they did not compose. And she went on to speak about the concept of teachers being given the charge to carry water in baskets. And you know fully well our Jamaican reality, that proverb that speaks to people being given baskets to carry water. She went on to speak about how teacher agency is impacted by different factors. And of course, brevity is all about wit. Time factor, the choice of model. Teacher agency was impacted because at the end of the day, teachers ended up resorting to chalk and talk simply because they did not have resources within which to implement the changes that were required. Teacher agency was impeded because principals were denied them, whether advertently or inadvertently, denied them the privilege of enacting the changes within which they were supposed to enact. In this chapter, as I conclude, Professor Jennings gave us much food for thought, and we are compelled to grapple with the experiences of the teachers called to be agents of change, but denied the power to do so. Implicit in this chapter is a charge to curriculum practitioners and policymakers to not repeat the mistakes of the past and to grant teachers true agency in the implementation of the curriculum changes so they won't be given baskets to carry water. I thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies, for your commentary and insights, your reflections on the book. I did say earlier that Prof. Jennings worked at the University of Guyana, and we've had two ladies who have presented from the context of UWI Mona. We will now have two gentlemen who you will have their recordings. Mr. Azad Khan, he's now head of Department Curriculum and Instruction, Faculty of Education and Humanities at the University of Guyana, and Mr. Aubrey Overton, who is the former head of the Guyana Technical Institute, lecturer in curriculum, Faculty of Education and Humanities, University of Guyana. And they will both share now, and I had said both of these persons are past students of Prof. Jennings.
Review of the book, Revision and Change, Case Studies of Curriculum in School Systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean by Professor Emerita Zelene Jennings. The author, Professor Jennings, is a veteran Caribbean educator and scholar who has a great passion for educational advancement, particularly in the Commonwealth Caribbean. She is a very concerned, caring, and responsible educator whom I have known for almost 3 decades. Her book presents a timely and much-needed review of the important issues of change and innovation in curriculum in the Commonwealth Caribbean. Revision and Change consists of 10 informative chapters. The content maps the journey of educational changes and innovation going back for more than 4 decades. It also interrogates the effects of the changes brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. The book, Revision and Change, presents relevant and useful curriculum case studies at the early childhood, the primary, and the secondary levels, where curriculum innovations and changes were implemented. It also reflects on and discusses the efforts of curriculum changes and the impact on the education system in the Commonwealth Caribbean. This book is focused on improving students' learning and will be useful to the many different stakeholders in the education system, such as policymakers, administrators, educators at all levels, researchers in education, and even parents. The book clearly demonstrates that education is a journey and not a blueprint. This well-organized, documented, and informative book is highly recommended as an excellent resource material for all teacher training institutions, libraries in the Caribbean, and even for other education systems. It is a timely and insightful addition to the paucity of scholarly literature on Caribbean curriculum issues, and it is highly recommended for all educators.
Thank you, UWI Press and Professor Zillian Jennings-Craig for this opportunity to make comments on the professor's book, Revisioning Change. I am Aubrey Overton of Guyana, and I have over 30 years experience in curriculum change in the education system of Guyana, the technical institutes, and the University of Guyana. The 18 case studies as presented in the book provides a vision of the attempts by initiators to create change, that is innovation, change in the Caribbean, in Caribbean countries and Guyana. And these changes are over 50 years, and provided are issues that have been developed in these attempts, thus creating underperformance and failure in the system due to ineffective implementation. The goals of the case studies are presented and provide guidelines that should be used by innovators to eliminate the identified issues in those attempts that were done before, so as to improve their delivery and hence overcome underperformance and failures. Some of these issues you will find still exist in the Guyana situation and need to be eliminated. Further, the book provides tables and figures with useful data that further clarify and indicate why some of the innovations have underperformed or failed. Clearly explained in the book are some strategies that initiators of innovation should follow. For example, characteristics of change, characteristics at local level, characteristics at the school level, and factors, external factors to the school. Also, the 5 elements of implementation fidelity are also provided, and these should be closely followed by initiators of innovations. You'd find that the book provides a logical sequence, creating continuity and integration, and defining factors about change efforts. I intend to recommend usage of the book to my students at the University of Guyana who are registered for the course, Curriculum Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. I will place the book on my reading list for the course. The students are usually head teachers, education officers, and lecturers of the University of Ghana and the technical institutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan and Mr. Overton. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from students who have given their reflections. You have heard from a colleague, Professor Stafford Griffith, who has given his review and charge. And now it's time to hear from the author herself. You've heard a lot about Professor Jennings before, and I know that she's not a lady who wants me to tell you a lot more about her, but I must say something about her before she comes to speak. Zelyn Jennings, Professor Emerita, is a former director of the School of Education and Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education at UWI Mona. She holds graduate degrees in education with specialized study in curriculum development and educational philosophy. She taught me philosophy when I was doing my MBA. She has held several positions throughout Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, including being Professor of Education, Head of Department of Foundations, Administration, and Teaching at the University of Guyana. She has over 40 refereed publications, and among these, there are 3 that I'm going to lift up here. Language Education in the Caribbean, selected articles by Dennis Craig, published by UWI Press in 2015, co-authored by Jeanette Alsop. Reimagining Education in the Commonwealth Caribbean, co-authored by Dion Edwards Carr, published by Ian Randlin in 2017. And the one we celebrate today, Revisioning Change, Case Studies of Curriculum in School Systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean, published by UWI Press. There's much more available about Prof. Jennings on the internet and much more on her publications. And I invite Professor Zelyn Jennings to come now and give her comments. Please make her welcome.
Thank you very much, Marcia, for that introduction. Just as short as I like it to be. In fact, it's just a little longer than one that how I was introduced in 2016 when I gave a keynote address at a conference. The chair said, well, this is Zelyn Jennings. We all know her. And if you want more information, just check the internet. And so we continue. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being here, right here in the on the Mona campus. And I'm hoping that there are many persons joined us online. I was kind of hoping that we would have been able to see who's online, but it's not set up that way, I'm told. But those who are online, thank you for being there and for participating. I'm really hoping that my son, Justin, is listening in, taking some, a little time out of his busy schedule just to see something of his mother. And it would be really good if my colleague, Dr. Frank Reeves, was there from the UK. He did promise that he would stay up because, it's about 10 o'clock or so. Maybe he is there. And of course, I'm very happy to see all those persons from Guyana, Professor Griffith, Mr. Overton, Mr. Khan. A special thanks to all who have spoken about the book. Prof. Griffith, I think he gave a very good overview of the chapters of the book. Dr. Main, Ms. McGowan Hunter, I really commend the way in which you've captured what the book is about, and some will focus on particular chapters. If I didn't have a copy of the book, I would certainly go and get one as soon as the launch is over. So, as we heard, a recurring theme in the book is change as a journey. And I think Prof. Griffith captured it. In the first chapter of the book, I actually say, change is a journey, let us begin ours. And in the penultimate chapter, that's chapter 9, it begins, our journey has ended. It's time to reflect on where we've been and what we've learned along the way. And for me, the writing of this book has been a long journey. Although I didn't realize it then, I would trace the initiation of the idea for the book back to about 1975 or 1976. That's when I was doing my master's in curriculum at Birmingham University in England. And I did a course on education in developing countries and became interested in attempts to introduce change into educational systems. And I read about this in all over the world. I read about these attempts in Africa, in Asia, various parts of Europe. And in the 70s, a lot was being written about change in Papua New Guinea. And I kept asking myself, well, what about the Caribbean? What has been our experience? The School of Education at Birmingham had an excellent library. In fact, it was so good that throughout my life at U, when I went on study leave, I always made my way back to the UK and back to Birmingham, to the School of Education. The library was exceptionally good. And when I was studying in the 70s, I looked all over, checked all the journals in search of, publications on the Caribbean. Search as I might, I didn't find anything. So when I applied to do the PhD at UWI, Mona, 1978, I said that that's what I wanted to do. And that's a question that I wanted to answer. I wanted to research how we introduce change into education systems in Jamaica. Unfortunately, there was no one to supervise me in that area. And it was suggested that I go abroad, go back to the UK or try the US. But if I want to research change in the Caribbean, I need to get my data from the Caribbean. So it didn't make sense to me. So I had to choose something else to get my PhD. But that did not deter me from continuing with my interest in answering that question that I had posed. So while I was doing the research for my PhD, I started doing research on curriculum change. And I gradually, was able to get my work published. And as time went on, I broadened the scope. I didn't just want to focus on Jamaica. I wanted a Caribbean perspective. Now, fortunately, in the 1970s and 1980s, we had a number of students from different islands in the Caribbean who came to the School of Education at Mona to do their bachelor's degree or their master's degree. Most of the islands came. And also Belize. A lot of students also came from Belize. And of course, in my curriculum and philosophy groups, I would encourage them to talk about their education systems. I got them to do research on curriculum in their education systems. So I was able to learn quite a lot from the students themselves. But there was a missing piece of the puzzle, and that was Guyana. because as you know, Guyana has its own university. And I realized that if I wanted to learn about curriculum change in the Caribbean, I had to include Guyana. And so to cut a long story short, I spent the decade of the 90s in Guyana, learning about the education system. I was teaching, I was researching, publishing, because I was at the base in the Faculty of Education at the University of Guyana. So it's so good to see Mr. Khan and Mr. Overton, the two of the past students. You know, Mr. Overton, so I supervised his master's study. And in fact, a publication of his is in one of the Journal of Education Development in the Caribbean. Fast forward to 2015, by which time I had retired from uni. And I recall one day asking myself, well, all this research that you've been doing for some 35 years or more on curriculum change, what's the value of it to ministries of education, to teachers, to colleges, to university students? And to answer that question, I realized that I would have to synthesize all the research that I'd done with the years. And that is when I decided to write the book. But that wasn't an easy task at all. And there were numerous challenges that I encountered over time. I'll just mention about 3 of them. The first one I would call finding a voice. When I did the first draft, this was about 2018, and I read through it just didn't sound right. It was very dry. I would describe it as quite boring. And an academic who was in the field would be able to bear it. But I thought everybody else would be turned off. So I had to find a style of writing, which was perhaps more down to earth, flowed more easily, read almost like a story, because I wanted it to appeal to a very wide audience. So I had to go back to the drawing board, and I had to rewrite every chapter. And as I wrote this time, I decided to ask some colleagues to read the chapters and give me some feedback. One of those persons was the late Dr. Rose Davis. And it is a pity that she's not here for me to thank her, because the case study in early childhood education is all the better for her insightful comments. When I finally submitted to UE Press, I had to wait a good time to get feedback from peer reviewers. But whoever they were, my thanks to them, because their feedback certainly pushed me to improve on the book. And in fact, the feedback led me to having to write a new chapter. It was that in each of the chapters, I'd sort of drawn on the implications for the teacher, the role of the teacher. But I needed to have a chapter which focused on the teacher. And I think it's a good thing I did, because that's the chapter on the teacher as an agent of change. But when you have to write a new chapter, that put me into a tailspin. Because if I had to include another chapter, something had to be taken, or I had to find some way of reconfiguring the material so that I didn't lose, anything that was there. I already had 10 chapters, and going beyond that would increase the price of the book, and you have to be very conscious of that when writing. So that was a challenge I had to deal with, and it really took me a long time, many months, Because for one thing, the teacher was an agent of change. I had to research all of that. I had to check out all the literature. Anyway, I overcame that hurdle. And I was now thinking that I was ready to resubmit the manuscript when along came the third challenge, COVID-19. And this was around February 2020. I remember when it was announced that we were in a pandemic and everything was coming to a standstill. I literally went into a panic attack because I said to myself, what's going to happen to my book? It's not going to go anywhere because we don't know when the pandemic is going to end. And I said that if this goes on for a long time, the material is going to become outdated. The references would really need to be updated. And then I also questioned the relevance of the book. At this time, when the overriding concern was crisis in the health system, in countries' economies, children being out of school, many unable to access the internet for online learning, and the teachers unprepared for online teaching, and parents, not being well prepared for homeschooling. But I said I couldn't be writing a book during COVID and be oblivious to these issues. And I felt I had to do something about it. I had to address it. And I went back to the drawing board, and a lot of the speakers, picked it up. Nadine picked it up, and certainly Professor Griffith also. I had to rewrite the introduction. And the chapter that I had written on technology, I asked whether technology can revolutionize teaching and learning. I had to go and go and look at that. I had to revise that. And once I made adjustments to early chapters, it impacted the last two chapters. So there's a lot of work that had to be done. And at some point in time, I would look on my computer where I'd saved the files, and I saw so many version this, version that of chapters and of the entire book. And I was really confusing myself at one point. So I'm sure that you can imagine my relief when 2 years later, early 2020, 2022, I began to receive proofs of the chapters of the book to review or any final corrections. Revisioning change, this book is what I would have liked to present as my PhD thesis in 1982. It's 40 years late, but at least I've answered the question I posed back in 1975. I couldn't get anybody to help me to answer the question, but the research that I did over the years, I attempted an answer. There are many more ways in which the question can be answered. And as I say in the final chapter, the book has attempted to fill a gap in research on curriculum innovations in the Commonwealth Caribbean. But there is a much wider gap that needs to be bridged. But I have to leave that to future scholars to continue the journey and expand on our knowledge of this aspect of the curriculum. When I look at the number of years that I spent researching and writing the book, I don't have that many years ahead of me to write another one or even to follow up on it. So thank you all again for participating in this book launch. And a special thanks to all who made this book launch possible, particularly the School of Education, Dr. Rainford, you were so kind in allowing the school to be part of this. And Ms. Randall, the press, I want to thank you, for the contribution. Dr. Rainford, thank you profusely for doing such a fine job in chairing this book launch at such short notice. Thanks, thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Jennings. As I listened and I said, yes, focused, determined, disciplined, that's Prof. Jennings. And commended. All right, so we're now almost at the end, but we have a presentation of books, and we have presentation to 3 local libraries, but there's also University of Guyana National Library and the University of Guyana Library. I believe that's going to be done online, but I'm going to go with the local libraries first, and I'm going to call the representative from the UA Main Library, who is Mrs. Virgilie Reed Lawson, who is a reference librarian, UWI Main Library. I have it. Next. Prof. Jennings, yes. Miss Keisha Myers, Manager, Collections Development, National Library of Jamaica. There's one more. And this would be Miss Dion Barnett, Senior Librarian representing the Director General, Miss Maureen Thompson of the Jamaica Library Service. Excellent. Now, I'm not sure how the next section will go. I think there is supposed to be a symbolic presentation because the books did not get to Guyana on time. But somebody will just help me to know what to do next. They're going to be, oh, excellent. So we have representatives from the University of Guyana. And Prof. Griffiths, is he there?
I'm not sure if Ms. George is there. She's the chief librarian, University of Guyana.
So I'm
I'm not sure what I'm expected to do.
But, Miss George, if you were there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. I'm not sure if you're. Oh. Will you help me to unlock my camera? Because it's not unlocking. Start my video. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having problems starting my camera. So,
Point on the screen to start the camera. Do you see it?
so if the host can help me, I'll
There
be
is
able to
a prompt on
start
your
it.
screen to start the camera, Miss George. Do you see it?
We're sending the prompt to start the video. Are you seeing it? Miss George, are you seeing it popping up?
Well, this is one of the glitches in technology that we have learned to live with. But Ms. Gwyneth George is the chief librarian at the University of Guyana. And we were hoping to get the books to Guyana in time for the launch, but we did not succeed. So, Ms. George, you can expect the books to get to you soon. We were trying to get them to Professor Griffith and ask him to sort of hand them over to you and
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm unable to start my video. I'm not sure what is happening, but thank you so much.
Okay, so. So thank you, Ms. George. I hope that the book will be very useful to the students at the University of Guyana and that in the general public, because it will be in the National Library as well.
Thank you very much, Prof, and for the technology persons. Thank you. Sometimes these things don't happen, but it's live. We understand. It's a thought that counts. All right. So we're just about at the end, and there is something called closing remarks. So let me just say it was a pleasure to be deputizing for Dr. Roop this afternoon, and just for being here. I want to thank you all for coming. I hope that you are as satisfied as I am. I will certainly leave you with one more quote from the book. It says, it's from chapter 9, verse 170, page 176. The Bible. When practitioners are better able to understand what past changes are, they will be able to impart greater sensitivity to their plans for change, and as a result, improve the probability for success in their program. That said, revisioning change provides an opportunity for practitioners to understand past changes and to create the basis for implementing successful change. Are you a practitioner? Do you have any background about curriculum change? No problem. Buy the book. Find out. It's at the back. Have a good evening. I think there are refreshments. Hang around and chat. Meet the author, let her sign your book, and all of that.
you.